you for joining today's Boutique Hotel News webinar. This is our first webinar back after the summer break. We have a full schedule all the way running up until Christmas, but today we are going to be focusing on ADRs and the topic of how far can they go. My name's Eloise Hanson. I'm your host for today's episode, and I'm the editor of Boutique Hotel News. We are a trade multimedia publication covering the global boutique, lifestyle, and luxury hotel industry. Our webinar series sponsor is Agilysys, a hospitality software company, and we do have Matthew Prosser, Senior Sales Director for EMEA, on the call today. So to provide a very short introduction to Agilysys and to introduce himself, why don't I hand over to Matthew straight away. So Matthew, welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Louise. It's a pleasure to be on the webinar today. Yes, so a quick introduction to myself. I've spent 1 or 2 years in hospitality, probably dating back to the early 90s when I first got involved in hotels and hotel management. I spent probably 5-6 years working in hotels before I then joined a company that was known as Micros back in 96, 97, then Micros Fidelio, now Oracle. I spent about 14 years there, and around 2010, 2011, I decided to move and I joined Agilysys. So since about 2010, 2011, I've been associated with the Agilysys portfolio of solutions. And certainly over that time, I've witnessed and probably been party to the evolution of our current intuitive and really rich ecosystems of solutions, I think relevant to all aspects of a hotel or a resort's needs. A bit on Agilysys as an organization. Well, its roots firmly embedded in the US, but now very, very much a global organization. We design, create, and develop products that deliver high return hospitality. We do that by developing interactions that digitizes and tailors guest personalization, resulting in the ability to monetize and ultimately generate better profitability. All verticals of hospitality are served by ourselves, whether that be cruise, hotels, the luxury segment, any organization essentially that has a hospitality need to either manage or drive efficiencies. We have a complete ecosystem of modernized, intuitive and feature-rich solutions. I guess just an example that perhaps shows our forward thinking, our latest venture, we call that Guest Sense AI. It continues, I guess, that innovative theme and focuses on how we can leverage AI, and we'll talk a little bit more about AI, I guess, as we go through this webinar, but how we can harness that to deliver on anything from dynamic pricing, availability, upgrades, and also adding into the mix conversational reservations, something that we're perhaps all beginning to get familiar with chatbots in our consumer lives. So, having represented the business for nearly 14 years or more, these are truly exciting times for Agilysys and its clients. We're at the forefront of delivering practical applications expressly created for hospitality. And this is just a start of what we can achieve. So I'm really looking forward to joining in on this webinar, Eloise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Let's meet our other panelists for today, and I am going to move left to right as per the PowerPoint slide. So Inna, let's move to yourself next. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. So my name is Inna. I'm head of revenue at the Lanesborough Hotel. So the Lanesborough Hotel is part of Earthcare Collection, is a 12 masterpiece hotels. So kind of like an independent chain of hotels. Focused on the uber luxury segment. We're just located off Hyde Park, a very quintessentially British hotel. And myself, I've been in the industry now for 16 years in hospitality, and out of those 5.5 years in revenue, but pretty much have experience working in pretty much any department in the hotel except for probably engineering, so they wouldn't let me, otherwise I'd do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Inna. James, over to you next, please.
Hi, good morning, Eloise. Thank you very much for having me. I'm James Combs. I'm the general manager at Champneys Eastwell Manor. We are a 4-star country house spa hotel and resort down just outside Ashford in Kent. Part of the Champneys brand, which is 6 properties encompassing spa resorts and hotels and spas. I've been general manager here for 4 years. I've been in senior management roles for the last 10 years of my career, and I've been in hospitality now for 24 years. Going on, so I'm very excited to be here. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, James. And last but by no means least, Fausto, welcome.
Hi, all. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Fausto. I work for Price Labs for 4 years now. Before working in Price Labs, I was working in hospitality, a little bit of everything. I started more in the events management side, and then I moved more to operation and then revenue management. Yeah, and I managed our solution consultant team both in Europe and Brazil, and happy to be here.
Super. Thank you, Fausto. Thank you all. And I'm going to take this opportunity to say that all the LinkedIn profiles of our speakers have been popped into the chat. I do encourage you all to connect and carry on this conversation long after we've finished this webinar. So a brief overview of how today's session is going to run. We'll probably spend around 45 minutes or so in discussion today, followed by some time at the end to take any questions from our audience members. So if you do have any burning questions that you simply can't wait for LinkedIn, please submit these using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens, and I will get round to asking those as and when relevant. And today's webinar is being recorded, and every registrant will receive a copy of the replay by about Wednesday. So I always like to kick off our webinars with some context. I think it always helps to set the scene. And we've seen recently how sporting and music events have had a huge direct impact on ADRs. I've heard Taylor Swift at one point, I think she single-handedly held up the hospitality industry. We've seen the impact of the Olympics, and more recently, Oasis and their reunion, which is Oasis reunion has certainly put dynamic pricing back into the limelight. It's a very hot topic at the moment. And whether you're a fan of dynamic pricing or not, you may question whether ADR is even the right metric to track. And we recently held an in-person event here in central London, where we invited a series of luxury hoteliers to contribute to a roundtable discussion with Agilicis. And all in the room agreed that while post-stay reporting is great and can help to deliver those important future insights, real-time reporting is where we want to be in order to maximize the most relevant and personalized revenue opportunities. And on the next slide, I have taken some headlines from other media sources. And the top one, more hotels around the world report an average rate of over $1,000. So in 2019, around 150 hotels globally reported an ADR of over $1,000. This year, that number has jumped to 460 hotels. And some examples of how I suppose ancillary revenue is being driven. TOC, which is a hospitality reservation experience and events platform, has partnered with a hotel collection called Curated Hotel and Resorts in the States to help its members drive those ancillary revenues. And we've all probably heard of Barbiecore, but have we heard about resort core? This is a new term that I've come across quite recently. And this is the idea that luxury hotel swag, so these are your baseball caps, well, jumpers, handbags, tote bags, however you want to package that up, this merchandise is becoming ever popular. And it's not just an additional source of revenue, but certainly a savvy marketing tool. And I just want to end this conversation around subscriptions. We saw that Wizz Air launched an all-you-can-fly subscription earlier this year. But will subscriptions take off in the hotel sector? I know about 2 years ago, subscriptions were a very popular topic. How they will materialize and manifest within the hotel sector is definitely one to consider. So I hope that's given you all some food for thought. And I'd like to kick off today's discussion by just commenting on some poll results that we ran on LinkedIn. We asked our Boutique Hotel News network whether they thought ADRs have reached a peak level. 64% voted no. 26% believe that ADRs will reach a peak level in the next 6 months. And then 5% believe that it will take 6 months plus. They'll hit a peak level in the next 6 to 12 months. And another 5% will believe that it's going to hit a peak in a year's time. So I'm just curious to hear whether the panel agree, disagree. Are they surprised by these results? I'd like to come to James first, if I may, and your thoughts on this.
Sure. I think by and large, as I was saying earlier, the results don't particularly surprise me, Eloise. I think any ceilings that we sort of see or interpret in ADR are only ever momentary ceilings. I tend to sort of liken or view ADR in sort of the same way as the housing market, in that we constantly have, and we have done for a very long time, see those rates going up and up and up. And sure, we might see a little blip. You know, we might see a softening for a little while, but the overall trend is going up, and I'm convinced that will continue. The only variable is the pace of that climb, and you know, there will be occasions like Taylor Swift and Oasis that see that pace go up enormously very quickly before settling back again. But overall, no, I don't think we're reaching a finite ceiling. Certainly, I don't think that's on the cards.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, James. Inna, may I hear your thoughts, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every time somebody's asking whether we've reached peak ADRs in London, I always invite them to look into Paris ADRs, and you know, quite often double what we're charging here. So it's in general, no, I personal opinion, I don't think we have reached a peak, although I do agree with James that we probably will see a softening, particularly speaking for the luxury market. You know, the amount of extra supply that we've received in the market this year, and we continue to receive into next year, has an impact and has a big impact on the ADRs and overall. But at the end of the day, you know, ADRs are very much a moving piece, and within London, ADRs are very much driven by special events. And so now, you know, we've got Oasis to look forward to next year. Obviously benefited from Taylor Swift. And you know, who knows what other events. So if anything, I'm always encouraging to look at generating more events for London and wider regions as well, of course. So but yeah, definitely not surprised. And also just looking at 2019 numbers, I mean, we've moved so much past 2019 numbers. I think the overall reporting was something like at least 30% growth in ADR overall within like luxury markets on 2019 numbers, but profitability has not moved that much. Because the costs have risen so much. I don't think hotels are going to be rushing back into the old rates. Plus now we've gotten our guests to kind of be used to the new normal rates, and why would we roll back? But I do think that probably a bit of softening is coming up in the market, and particularly next year, predominantly because of all the extra supply that we're seeing.
Inna, if I may stay with you just for a moment here, because you mentioned that, yes, luxury hotels have seen huge ADR growth, but there are other KPIs that perhaps either haven't moved so much or are relatively stable in that respect. So what KPIs do you find most valuable in measuring the commercial success beyond the occupancy, beyond the ADRs?
Well, for us being a full service property, it's really important that our guests' ancillary spend is maximised, and it's really important for us that the guests that come here want to spend as much time within the walls of our hotel as possible. So looking at a metric like a TREFPAR is really important for us. It's something that we kind of are focusing on, making sure that we're using upsell and cross-sell opportunities as much as possible. And again, we're talking about profitability. It kind of, you know, you have to really work hard for GOP conversion these days. So anything that can help us is great. And I think with KPIs, again, the most important thing, in my opinion, with KPIs is to align it to what your business wants to achieve. And for different types of hotels, different KPIs are going to be relevant. For example, we really value our return guests, and the cost of having a guest return to the hotel is significantly lower than acquiring a new guest. So return guest ratio is another KPI that we're looking at and focusing on growing. But equally, I invite particularly revenue professionals to look outside of just their business KPIs that they're used to, but focus also on other areas. For example, your review scores are very important and have a direct correlation between your commercial success versus what you're seeing, and also your revenue results. So we work with a supplier that helps us consolidate all of the reviews online into one number that's specific, that's quite a good focus for us, and also that's comparable to our competitive set. And another thing, interestingly, actually, as a revenue professional, I look at employee engagement survey and employee engagement score a lot. And for me, as somebody who oversees a reservations department, for example, how happy that department is, again, has a direct correlation into how easily we're able to convert our lookers into bookers and our callers into actual guests. So I guess from my side, of course, I can talk about things like RevPAS, when you talk about revenue per available seat hour, and we have a spa as well. So we look at things like RevPAF. So you're looking at your treatment hours, revenue per available treatment hour. So these are all relevant KPIs, but also the one thing I would say is that we're missing comparison with a competitive set at the moment in something wider than just RevPAR. Because at the moment you look at some of the main suppliers, you look at occupancy, ADR and RevPAR comparison. It's not easy to look at TrevPAR, for example, comparison. It's not easy to look at net ADR comparison versus comp set. And so sometimes you do want to have that wider picture of, what other hotels are getting it better, not better, and so on. And then another thing is forward-looking data. We're starting now to see some vendors venturing into showing RGI or as a revenue generation index, or for example, RevPAR in future, because that's really what's becoming all of a sudden very valuable, is my ability to be able to influence what's the picture in the future rather than once it's done, looking at the past, kind of analyzing it. So I think what I'd like to see more from vendors as a hotelier is ability to influence things in the future, more from a market share point of view, again, TrevPAR point of view, than just looking in the past all the time, that we tend to do quite a lot of.
I was going to ask you how are you tracking these? You mentioned that there's and perhaps an innovative need to look outside of the business set of KPIs, which suggests to me that you're going to be relying more on vendors, on suppliers to come out with those solutions to provide you with the tools necessary in order to track these. But it sounds to me that there's going to be a whole host of data points that you're trying to monitor and measure and connect together. Could you talk a little bit about how you are tracking these?
Absolutely. I mean, there's the one thing I want to be clear on, I don't think you need to be waiting for the perfect vendor to start collecting that data. So there are things that we do in-house there, obviously, where there are quite a lot of technical solutions that allow us to do it. But again, the challenge is, so to answer your question, we're using a combination, I guess, of kind of internal tracking, but also vendors around us. But there's still, as you said, there's a lot of data points. And I guess the challenge is, how do you consolidate it in one day, in one place where KPIs make sense for everyone? But overall, yeah, I mean, we kind of quite lucky as a hotel. We don't need to wait for approval of, many layers of corporate before we introduce a tool into the hotel. So from that perspective, we're quite flexible. If we want to try something, we just do it. But I think when it comes to competitive analysis, we do depend on vendors. It's not information that I'm easily able to collect myself.
How many metrics do you operate with? Just curious. I mean, you've listed many.
I haven't counted.
Yeah.
I haven't counted, but to be honest, also, I think it's important I'd rather have fewer metrics that are punchy and specific than looking at too many things just because. right? So it needs to be relevant to the business.
Yeah.
But you mean quite a few.
Yeah.
Oh, we would just chime in there, Eloise. So with quite a diverse market range in Champneys, one of our key metrics is per person per day spend. So we're not just looking at what is being spent in each outlet by individual. It's each individual who's coming onto the property for whatever reason, whether that's a spa stay or a transient stay, a wedding guest, an external afternoon tea guest, etc., and how that impacts on the per person per day spend, which from a commercial perspective gives us great insight, and it forms the basis for looking forward for all our budgets and forecasts and everything. But it also makes it very, very tangible for the team when they're down on the floor, because they can see then at that point, if they sell an extra cup of coffee, they can see that result immediately. So, and that's not a metric I've seen utilized anywhere else, and it's not one I've used anywhere else in my history. So I find that really interesting to find the budgets built around that, as opposed to TrevPAR, RevPAR, etc.
And is that something you look at on a daily basis, James? You'll have a report. Yeah.
Yeah, we have that daily. It forms the basis of our daily briefings. It forms the basis of our weekly exec calls. It's everything.
Well, there's certainly some new metrics that have been shared today that I haven't heard or come across. I do wonder what the next one is going to be. But Fausto, you're coming to this conversation from a slightly different perspective, because Price Labs has clients both in the independent boutique sector, but also vacation rentals. And I'm wondering if you are viewing this topic through a slightly different lens as to what you think should be the key metrics for measuring and reporting success and performance.
Yeah, so I think one of the differences sometimes it's hoteliers or short-term rental companies, they sometimes don't necessarily know what they want, and I will explain what in terms of data and hyperlocal data. So sometimes I know some operators that say I want to implement dynamic pricing because I want to track my competitor rates. They say like, so in reality you want a rate shopper and you want to use a rate shopper, but you don't. In reality, you don't want to use dynamic pricing, for example, right? So it's a little bit different exactly how it works. Some people are focused completely in competitors and they want competitor information, and they want a traditional kind of rate shopper with more features or less features or more information, like Ina was saying that sometimes you don't have TrevPAR, you only have RevPAR and all of this. But in reality, if you want to use dynamic pricing, you are looking for trends in the market and understanding future trends to then apply rates based on trends, not exactly on what one specific competitor is doing or not. Of course, you can do this, but ideally, if you really want a dynamic pricing strategy, you should focus on trends. This is a little bit what I see when we go from, let's say, traditional hotels to a more of a hybrid model, etc. People look more or the rate shopper or the dynamic pricing feature. This is one difference. One thing that I think it's key, it's the data has to be hyperlocal. And when we say hyperlocal, it really has to be hyperlocal and adapt to your needs. If you are working on a business focus or corporate hotel, you have to be able to customize the data for your own segment. If you are in a city that you have a beach area and then you have a business center area, you have to be very local because the behaviors are different, right? In terms of metrics, I don't want to repeat because some of the metrics is the same that Ina and James and Matthew mentioned, but I will say that I think all of them said, but I will use another term that is RevPAG, that basically it's a revenue per available guest. That is the mix of everything. It's like, and usually more in boutique hotels, for example, as this is typically focused on providing a high-touch guest experience, understanding the total spend per guest across all the services, I think is crucial to optimizing the revenue. So this is something that you really need to understand. You may track metrics, but there will be always a part that the team has to give you the feedback as well, because the issue when you have reports is that you can only see what you sold, but you cannot see the opportunity that you lost. Like the opportunity that you lose, it's something that has to come from the people. Like, I think I could have sold this, but I wasn't able to do it, right? Because in the report you only see the result, not what you lost. Then another metric that I think it's very basic, it's very like old school, but it's still very important, is the GOPAR, right? The gross operating profit per available room. And in smaller properties, ensuring that each room contributes as much as possible, I think, to the overall profitability. I think it's key. I think here is where dynamic pricing strategies can reflect local demand trends. So you can ensure that you get the maximum value, even if you have fewer rooms. Of course, if you have a big resort, it's the strategy is a little bit different. The focus is a little bit different. One thing that I still think that has to be, we have metrics, but sometimes we don't see this as a more of a holistic approach. It's the occupancy versus rate balance. We know how to measure, we know what KPI should we see, but what exactly it's the right balance, it's something that sometimes is not very clear. So if I ask sometimes to some revenue managers, say like, okay, what is the right balance in your hotel between occupancy and rate? He will say, oh, my RevPAR is this, or it's not exactly what I'm asking. I'm asking what is the right balance, like based on historical data, what is the right balance? Is it 70% occupancy with this ADR? Is it? But just trying to understand the right balance. Sometimes it is very focused on the revenue itself, not the profitability, right? And some hotels have the cost of having guests, it's much more expensive than others. So I think when you calculate this occupancy versus rate balance, it's not the RevPAR that I think it's as important. I think it's the profitability after this. And so what should I focus? Less bookings with a higher ADR, or no, depending on my operational costs. Okay. Then I completely agree with Dina, and I think we see this in the data. Like when we look at data, the guest retention and loyalty metrics, I think it's becoming more and more and more important. Like repeat business is crucial for any, and I'm focusing on boutique hotels because the majority of our clients are boutique hotels. Okay, but specifically for small, mid boutique hotels, I think repeated clients and repeated bookings, it's crucial. And even where like you have to keep this relationship and this unique guest experience even after the guest leaves your hotel. Like you cannot the experience was awesome, he left you a good review, done. No, you have to keep contacting him every time, like maybe every couple of months, every 3 months, you just send them like an update, or send them like, hey, are you thinking on traveling again to this city? I don't know, but you have to follow up with them. And then you have to try to optimize all the ancillary revenue per stay that you can. Like if you don't have restaurant at your hotel, try to make some partnership with someone. If you work with business clients and you don't have a co-working space, do partner, like get some partner that has a co-working space. If you are in a place that a lot of people like to go on a boat ride, do some partnership, but you have to get this extra revenue. And if you don't have it inside, just do some partnerships. But having all these services, you are the owner of the client. You keep the communication, you keep understanding and knowing more of what the client wants. And maybe in this project, you don't have a restaurant, but if you understand what your guests need, in the next project, maybe you have the right restaurant. If you know if you should invest in a couple of boats for some boat tours. So I think understanding, and sometimes we focus a lot on the metrics and we forget understanding what the user wants, like what the guest wants and his behavior, his personality. And I think understanding this, it's the next step. And I think AI can also help with this. I think CRMs, everything in the future with more AI technology will be able to segment and give you some inputs of more information that you have.
Thanks, Fausto. On the topic of guest needs and maybe guest expectations, I want to come to James next, please, to talk about how you are balancing, I suppose, those increased rates against improvements in those services and amenities, and managing those guest expectations when they are on property.
Sure. So fundamentally, whether you're looking at service or amenities, if you're leveraging your rate, then the expectation has got to be clear from the guest about what they can expect. I think from a service perspective, that, and this is on the assumption that you've got a good level of service as a base point. From a service perspective, you've got to look at removing any barriers that exist to the guest enjoying their time with you. That could look like things in the ultra luxury market. That's where you see private butlers and stuff coming into play. In the mid-level or budget sectors, then it's going to be utilizing things like AI with regards to the guest experience, and being able to, whether it's order room service without having to pick up a phone and wait for somebody to answer the other end of it, or is there a WhatsApp facility or something so you're in immediate direct contact with somebody. Anything you can do to remove barriers to the guest enjoying their time with you. Alternatively, anything you can do to add layers of exclusivity to the people who are paying that additional rate. Are there facilities or service enjoyments that they can take advantage of as a result of the extra money that they're paying? When it comes to the actual amenities, it all really comes down to choice and how much your guests can do with you to satisfy their needs, and that's almost irrelevant of their market. If they're business guests, then you need to look into business related activities and facilities that they can use. If it's leisure, then you've got a boat partner that you can work with to provide choices, things for them to do, so that at no point can you afford for your guests to feel bored or like there's nothing for them to do, because the moment that they're sat there twiddling their thumbs, it's how problems start, because they're going to start looking for issues. And then again, making sure that the barriers to use of those choices are good and low, make them really, really accessible. And that doesn't mean it has to cost you as an operator a lot of money. Something that we've done within Champneys for the on the wellness side and for our spa guests, start adding in guided walks and guided runs. Yes, you have to pay for your team member for an hour, but it's one more thing that you can offer out to the guests. And even if they choose not to use that facility, at least they've had the opportunity, and you put the control in their court, rather than them waking up in the morning and going, okay, what are we going to do today? Oh, I don't know. Because that's the biggest problem.
Matthew, I want to bring you in here because there's been great examples, right, of how we can explore more creative solutions, and I'll come back to James to build on this in a moment. But technology has a big role to play here in ensuring that the right service and the right amenity is being offered, whether said guest takes it up or not. What role does technology currently play in helping to drive revenue beyond the room rates, and how do you see this evolving?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, it's really good listening to James. I think our thoughts are definitely aligned in how to maximize revenue 100%. But I guess just starting with some philosophical notes, really, hospitality is an industry that's been around for centuries, right? It has a great heritage. It's also a barrier, I think, that's holding the industry back. I think when I come from a technology angle, I see year on year, decade after decade, that we tend to make the same decisions when it comes to technology that we were doing 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Even today, I see that. And I guess I'm an ex-hotelier. I can get quite passionate It's definitely time to change that outlook. We have to change and accommodate all guest demographics and their needs. And I guess hospitality is a people and personal business, but technology and people can and do mix and complement one another. And we must use that enabler for transformation and not just automation. You know, the idea of using personalized data to improve guest experience is, well, reasonably well understood, to be honest. We've all kind of touched on that today. I've been talking big data, as I'm sure everyone else has, for many, many years. The problem is that today's majority technical architecture, i.e., well, I use a PMS and I like this reservation system for the restaurant, is broken. And that's because while these systems integrate, that they don't integrate well at the data level. Therefore, you know, you have guest profiles in all of these systems. And to be honest, there's not one single view of a guest. And for me, and being passionate in both hotels and technology, you know, we have to have a single unified profile within a single unified platform. So not multiple systems. And we have to have the ability to act in the moment. I can't remember now whether it was Ina or James mentioning it. When you have those people there in your property, now is the time to be able to, you know, capitalize upon revenue opportunity. And yes, you've got pre-arrival, you've got post-checkout, but in the moment is when their euphoria is at its utmost. And that's when you should be able to leverage technologies to deliver a better revenue potential. And you know, we have this phrase coined, you know, revenue per available guest. Of course, after listening to Ina, we need another metric to add to the list. But you know, we shouldn't think again of, you know, revenue per available guest, where my restaurant, my spa. And again, I have to repeat probably a couple of things that James has commented on. You know, we have to try and understand how we can monetize those guest preferences. It could be an experience outside of the property, pre-arrival, post-arrival. But ultimately, we can only understand more about the customer if we have a single profile within a single platform that makes it easy for the individuals such as Ina to interrogate data and to, in the moment, understand how can I get more revenue from that guest whilst they stay in my environment. And that's certainly over what 28 years of experiencing technology, I think what we've been missing. And it's time for the industry to adapt and move forward rather than believing we must do the same thing that we've done for the last 10 to 15 years, wrap everything around it, bring everything together. If the data's there in the first place, everyone's got data. Everyone's got data. It's just how we leverage that data to maximize potential. And that's what we must move forward with in terms of, you know, maximizing, you know, revenue per guest. You know, I see, we touched in our warm-up a little bit about space, and I was going to talk about how other perhaps suppliers in the industry talk about space. And I don't mean the fact that we found an area under the stairs that we can convert into a bar and generate revenue from it. I just mean using a, you know, a metric of space. You know, we're not a traditional high street clothing store that's yet to find the internet. You know, we're running a hotel, and again, we have to monetize the person, not the space. Space is always constrained. You know, the propensity for a happy person to spend is limitless. As long as we nail the right ideas with the right data, all right, we should have an endless opportunity to maximize revenue potential with guests. And ultimately, we can only do that through one view of the customer. And that's how we should move forward.
I'd like to bring Ina in here. I liked your point there, Matthew, about maybe not looking at the space, but looking at the person. Instead, we've heard revenue per available guest. We've heard rev pash. I think James mentioned something about guest per day per guest. I'm so sorry that I didn't note that one down when he spoke about
revenue per person per day.
There we go, revenue per person per day. But Ina, how do you analyze that guest data in order to identify those trends and those opportunities to drive improvements?
Yeah, no, great question. I mean, we the first, of course, important thing is to make sure that you do collect the data. As Matthew mentioned, is probably not as difficult to collect it. But the main thing is for us to make sure that we collect data at every touch point of the guest journey. So, you know, starting from the dreaming stage with engagement with our social media, and our social media presence plays a massive role in you know, what we showcase, the experiences and enticing guests into the property. Then following into the booking, the planning stage, because the insights that we get at the digital marketing stage is actually even booking data that comes, or rather looking data that comes before I get the data on what is being booked and on the books and the trends and the pace. And then, of course, the engagement for the guest into the pre-arrival and collecting data, not just upselling, but also what are you analyzing, what is working for the upsells, what is not working, because sometimes it is a matter of, I mean, trial and error a lot of the times. So, and then, of course, during the stay, the really important part to be collecting data there. The funny thing is, we sometimes think about data collection as purely something that a technological tool does. But it talks about this phenomenon before where, for example, having a tool like TripAdvisor is not always bringing the same effectiveness in the